Good evening, IL family, and happy Monday. Welcome back to your Inclination Life broadcast here with Coach Tamil / Lady Tamil, where we talk about positive living via simple truths. I want you to welcome you into our Faith Talk Monday. And so today we are going to be I won't say continuing the same conversation, but I will say building upon our conversation on last week, where we talked about the need to shift, especially for those of us that are desiring to go to a new place in life in 2020, and we're believing God for some things in our next year. And so tonight I'm going to be talking about our circle called life. This conversation comes, like as I said, building off last week, and it also comes from just my reading on this morning. So yesterday, as I was in church, my husband, who's also my pastor, blessed me with some words that God had given him to speak to me, and I knew that God had given him to speak to me because they confirmed some things that I had only been praying about in private. I hadn't even mentioned it. I hadn't even said anything. And so with the scripture that he gave me, I went back and I began to study, because he came out of Genesis, and I went back and in my study this morning, I went back to the beginning of Genesis. I went back to where God created the heaven and the earth, and I went back through the things that God had done. And there's some things that I saw in that. And this message of life being a full circle is not new to me. I've heard it preached. Someone mentioned it before in a message, and I'm not sure whom, so I don't want to give credit to somebody that is not due. But I'm wavering between two people that I probably listened to their message. And so he was talking about the understanding of how God operates in circles. Like, God is a God of completion. He operates in cycles. He operates in circle. Everything is a continuous motion with God. And so it's no different with our life. It's like it's a continuous motion. It's a continuous cycle. And so as I put in my post earlier on social media, I was saying that, sometimes when we think about shifting, we always think about shifting and we think about it on the vertical. We think about shifting is always moving up, and probably from our human standpoint, from our human understanding, from our necessity, from where we're going to pull from what's going to cause us to push, we probably do need to look at it or see it as us moving in an upward motion, as us moving on a vertical standpoint, as us moving closer to God, as us looking closer towards heaven. So we probably need to see it on that level. But sometimes I often say we have to remember that we have God on the inside of us. And so we don't always have to look up vertical. I remember someone saying that in a message one day, and it was humorous, kind of, the way they presented it, but it made you think, because we're always looking up and, when he's actually in. And so when we think about this beautiful life cycle that we're in, I want to encourage us on tonight that to understand that there is a cycle called life, to understand that even in our shifting, even in our growing, even in our maturing, that we cannot forget that we're in a cycle. We cannot forget that we're in a circular motion, that we cannot forget that we're in a continuous movement in a way that God has given us. And in that, even as I was looking at Genesis on the day, I saw some beautiful points to the life that we have in God. And 4 particular points. I actually came up with 4 P's that when we look at the plan that God has for our life. And I believe it's so important to understand that we're in this cycle, and we need to understand that even though we have individual lives, even though we have individual walks with God, that when we become united into this body as believers, those circles, our circles overlap, our paths crisscross, but it's all in motion until we get to the point where God completely manifests his plan, until we see that complete glorification. And so I put here, it's the reason why that we need to know that we're in a circular motion. One of the things here is that this helps us not to get stuck. Some of us get stuck in a place, and when we get stuck, we get very frustrated. We don't necessarily always recognize firsthand that we're stuck. We first experience the feelings of it. We first experience the frustration of it before we even give thought to the fact that we're stuck. We see that the cycle is still moving. Time is still moving. God is still going forward. But sometimes we get stuck in a place because of various situations. It could be something that we have experienced. It could be a dark place for us. And it's so important. I always, when I think about this, I think about what Solomon wrote when he wrote Ecclesiastes, and he talked about to everything there is a season, to everything there's a time, and there's a purpose in life. And so, even though some seasons brought something that we would actually receive with greater joy, there still was other seasons that we had to recognize, hey, that's part of the process. That's part of the cycle called life. That's part of the things that we're going through. But in that, as he kept going back and forth with a time for this and a time for that, the thing that stuck out to me is that we can't afford to get stuck in any place, because there's a time and a season for everything. And we're in this cycle called life. And when we understand that, we understand the necessity to shift. We understand the necessity to move. I've listened to people sometimes and they get very frustrated with you when they're in a place and a person is trying to encourage them to come up out of that place. A person is trying to encourage them to move from this place in your mind, so that your body, your faculties, your will follow behind it. But shift from this place in your mind, and people get frustrated. And then I've heard things like, well, you can't tell me when to move. You can't tell me when to get over things. And that is absolutely true. But what you have to know on tonight is that in this full cycle that we have called life, it's still shifting. It's still moving. Whether you decide to stay in that place or not, life is still moving. God's plan, his perfect plan, is still going forward, whether you decide to move along with it or not. And so I put here, the first thing that is a portion of his plan is purpose. And I believe this is so important for us because, a lot of times I believe when people feel like that they don't have a reason to be here on this earth, sometimes it's because they have not looked at the fact that they were created with purpose. They have not looked at the fact. And guess what? Sometimes, let's be honest, you may not really fully realize your God-given purpose. You may not realize where you actually fit in his plan and how he's utilizing you. But if you are surrendered on tonight, if you are following him, if you are following the will of the Lord, then I always say you don't have to get so caught up in that. You don't have to get so caught up in, do I know exactly? Is it a blessing when you know where you are supposed to be operating? Absolutely. Because the thing about it is you're going to be more effective. You're going to cater to that place. But sometimes that can be a catch-22, because sometimes you can cater to something so much because you said, I've figured out where I'm supposed to be, that you don't leave yourself open enough for God to take that thing and take it to the next place that he wants to take it. And so that's not part of our discussion, but hey, that's just a side note. And so I put here, no doubt that as you're sitting here listening on tonight, that God has a purpose and he has a plan for you. So I don't know, maybe tonight you're the person that, you're maybe in a deep, dark place in life. You're in a place where, you're like, how did I get here place? And on tonight, you need to know that even in the place that you are, you can be encouraged, because if you're breathing in and out, I always say this, there's still purpose. There's still something for you to do on tonight. And you may not be able to define it clearly, but you got to know that in yourself, that God has a purpose. And so as God was beginning to form things, as I was reading that in Genesis, I was looking at how on purpose he was, how he went through every little step, and every day he completed things. And there's so much that you can draw out of just Genesis 1 and how God went about his work. But everything had a purpose. Nothing was placed, nothing was done for no factor. It was, he looked at something and he decided that this is what it needed to be. He looked at something, when he spoke things into existence, he didn't just speak them into existence just to be speaking things all over the place, but he spoke things into existence with purpose. And even in our very own lives on tonight, when we use this tongue, when you use the power that God has given us, are we speaking with such purpose? Are we speaking out things that are we just spewing out things erratically? Or is it with such focus? Is it with such intent? That was a word, that was something that I talked about last week, was the intent and the focus that we were going to need in this year to come. And then I put here, his plan has always been complete. God's plan has always been complete, but he places us in this world world to be an instrument that will continue his cycle, that continuous cycle. Your existence on today is a part of his continuous cycle. And I keep reiterating this because I believe that there's so many people that don't know their worth in life. They don't feel like they're worth anything. They don't feel like, they look out into this big old world, and especially with the way that we're able to see into people's lives like we've never seen before. And we see things. Somebody put on social media today that nobody is ever going to post their struggle. Everybody is always going to post their victory. And yes, I know some people get on Facebook and they do all kinds of rants, but for the most part, when you're looking at people that are trying to be influencers in your life, they're not really getting ready to get online and tell you about the struggle that they're in. Now, they may get on there and testify after they've been brought through or brought out, or God's given a solution, which is very wise because they're telling you about how God brought them over. But they're not going to talk to you while they're deep down in their feelings, why they may be questioning, why they may be where that place where they may be wondering. And so I want to encourage somebody in this on tonight. And so I put here, generation to generation, God's cycle shall continue until it fully manifests itself. We should rejoice because we have purpose on the night. And that's what I want to get across under this portion about purpose, is rejoice because you've got a reason. There is a reason for you on this earth. I know mom and dad got together, but there is a reason, and there is a purpose, and there is an intent that God has for you. He has a special thing for you to do. And even if it's not in the limelights, like some people seem to be, that it still holds just as much value as that person that everybody seems to know, or that person that seems to be in front of everyone. The second thing that I notice about God's plan in this life cycle is about preparation. I noticed that as God was creating everything, I noticed that man was created on that day 6. And so he had placed everything in the earth before he placed man. He placed everything that man would need before he placed man actually in the earth. And that stood out to me because the thing about it is, I believe that sometimes we need to be encouraged that the very place that we're in, the very fact that we're on this earth, that God has already prepared everything for us. He's prepared everything that we need. And so we may be at a place in life where we're wondering, we're trying to figure things out. The puzzle pieces are not coming together, but don't lose hope. Don't lose faith. Know that God has already prepared everything you need. Sometimes it's the fact that we need to mature. Sometimes it's we need to go further along on our life cycle process. Sometimes it's some learning lessons in there. Sometimes there's a little bit more effort on our part, but whatever the case, know that whatever God has prepared for us, it's already sitting here in the earth. And I put here, quit seeing life from a place where you are defeated, believing there's something, here. You've got to believe that there's something here. You got to quit believing, you got to see it from a different place. You got to quit seeing yourself as defeated. A lot of times the hardest thing for us is when we're in the valleys of our life, because we feel like we somehow take on this feeling of defeat. But I always have to tell myself that when I'm in the valley, I'm set up for a victory. And if I'm not set up for a victory no more than for God to be glorified, I am set up for a victory because I'm in the valley. He's got to bring me out. On the mountaintop is great, but there's something about a valley situation that that you need God to come in. That you need God to bring you up out of that place. And so I put here, it doesn't lack. It's because it's not available, but perhaps you've omitted the process, which means you haven't gotten to the place of necessity. And so in saying that, is, as I said, everything that you need is in the earth, and it's not that it's not there. So sometimes when we feel like there's a lack, sometimes when we feel like there's a void, it's not that it's not there, but perhaps you just may not have reached that place. You may feel like, and I keep saying feel, you in your feelings, you may feel like you've reached a place of necessity, but God knows when you've absolutely reached that place of necessity. So hold on, use your hope on tonight. And I put when we get when we get there, it'll be there. Whatever that place is, when we get there, because of preparation, because God has already prepared that thing for us. When we get there, that place of necessity, that place where we need, it's going to be there. And so the next step in our life cycle process that I gathered from my study is planting. When I looked into, and I believe it was Genesis chapter 2, where he talks about that he prepared the garden and he placed Adam over in the garden. And I know sometimes in life we're in situations where it does not necessarily look like a garden, because when we envision that garden, we envision something beautiful. We envision a place where there is no lack. We envision a place where there is no want. But in our valley situations, even in that, as long as we have him, there is no lack. We may have a yearning on the inside of us, but there is no want. When we think about when the Bible says that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, that means that, I shall not lack. So when we have him, even in that place, just like we envision Adam being in that garden and God saying that, that you can eat from every tree, and everything. When we think about that, and we think about when we envision that, and we see how God gave him everything that he needed, how he planted him, how he prepared a place and he planted them there. I want to say to you on tonight that no matter where you are, wherever you are planted, if God has planted you there, even if it's in the valley, know that there is no lack. Know that there is no want. This is the hope that we can have in every season, in every portion of the cycle of our life. I put here, you may be in a place where, how did I get here? That might be you on tonight. You might be in a place like where you feel like this is no garden that I'm in. This is no place where I can eat from the trees. This is no place where I can sup with God. But don't you know that no matter where you are, that you can commune with him? No matter where you are, that there's something to be learned out of it. No matter where you are, that it is not in vain. And so in saying that on tonight, when he has planted you in a place, I've been planted in places sometime in my life, and I have wanted to kick and scream to get out of that. And there have been times in my life where I did kick and scream to get out of it, even though God didn't allow me to move from that place, because there was something to gather there. But when I settle in, and I settle into him, and I settle into focusing more on him, I saw that even in places where I thought was desolate, that there was life, that there was something sustaining there, that there was something for me to gather there, that there was something for me to draw from, to pull on, that God didn't put me in that place to die, but God put me in that place that I may live. Every place that I'm planted may not be the easiest terrain to navigate, but the thing about it, if God has placed me there, that I have everything that I need. And so when I looked at Adam, and I looked at the fact that Adam had been placed in that garden, I thought about how God had prepared that place, that he had a purpose for Adam from the very beginning, that he had prepared things for Adam, and that he had planted him in there. And the last portion of our life cycle is, I looked at the word promise on tonight. I put here how we've got to see the connections, and this is why I wanted to kind of build off my conversation on shifting from last week, and kind of making sure that, because I believe that sometimes in our shifting, I even encourage this sometimes when we're going through our life processes, to evaluate relationships, to evaluate things on our life, to purge things out of our life. There's a conversation that I often talk about, and I talk about the fact that, even people in our lives, we may have to place great distance there. But we need to be very careful about cutting people off, because God uses everything in our life. And we know that the word says he takes it and he turns it for good. But when we go to cutting things off our life, when we go to dividing ourselves from things, when we go from detaching our things from ourselves from things, oftentimes what we do is we have a lot of breaks in our cycle. We have a lot of, if you can think about a loop on tonight, and you can think about your life being this cycle, cycle, and you think about all the times that there's been a cut, that there's been a gap, and when there's a gap in the cycle, it doesn't operate smoothly. It doesn't transition smoothly. It doesn't because the thing about it, the fact that you're in a life cycle means that things are going to keep coming back around. They may look a little different, but if you look at your life cycle, it's one big full circle that you're going through. And the thing about it is, God wants to take those times that you were in the valley, those times that you may have experienced people that you wanted to detach yourself from, those times that you had things in your life that you made some not so excellent choices in life. He wants to take all of that and he wants to smooth the lines out to make a continuous life cycle, that you'll have a full circle from beginning to end, that from the beginning there was purpose, and in the end it will be purpose fulfilled. And so that's what I want to talk. That's what I mean here on this promise. When we are in the will of God, when we understand that we're in a full life cycle, then we understand that God has given us a promise. And so the fact that we're operating through this cycle, and we're operating through seasons, and we're continuing through cycles, and we're shifting, and we're going in motion, and we're going with him as he continues to move around in the cycles of our life. The thing that we can stand on tonight is to know that at various places, we're going to reach places of promise. I don't like to say the one place of promise, because I believe there are so many places of promise in our life. There are so many things that God is declared over our lives individually that we shall experience even while we're on this earth, as long as we're in his will. And so I believe that in saying that, there are so many places on this cycle, as you continue to go around in this cycle, that you're going to reach different places of promise. And so the thing about it, the hardest part is not reaching the place of promise. And I guess it is if you don't really go through the cycle like you need to. But I think a lot of times we miss it because we get stuck in the earlier processes. We get stuck in purpose, the fact that we don't really hold on to the fact that we have a purpose. We get stuck in the fact that we lose hope and don't know that he's actually prepared something for us. We get messed up because when he plants us in a place, we're usually trying to uproot ourselves and take ourselves somewhere else if we don't necessarily see or feel that it's there. But I want to encourage you on tonight to let God guide you through your cycle. Let God guide you through your life cycle. Wherever you are in it, let God guide you. Even if you're at a place where you're like, I'm ready to cut some things off and some people I'm ready to get rid of it, go to God in prayer and lay it on the altar and let him make the transition. Because the thing about it is, if he cuts anything out of your life, he's going to suture it to the point where you're not going to see a gap, where you're not going to see a detachment, where you're going to have this smooth cycle in your life. And so I've been at places in my life where I felt like I just wanted to cut some things off. But when I laid it on the altar, he took care of it so smoothly that I can't even put into words how he can let my cycle go along by removing things. And sometimes he kept things there, and later on in life, I understood it. So I know as this conversation probably was very interesting in the fact that it wasn't one of my normal conversations. But as we go into 2020, and those of us that are believing God to evolve into places and to actually hit some places of promise next year, I believe it's so important to understand that we're in this cycle and to not lose hope and understand some of these things and to hold on to these things so that we can move forward in him. That we won't get stuck, that we won't get discouraged in a place and not move as he is moving in our lives, as he is shifting us. So I hope this conversation has been encouraging to you on tonight. And I pray that you'll come in next week with me as we have another conversation about positive living via simple truths. Have a good night, and thank you for tuning in.